Hello, my dear friends. How are you doing? Hope you are having an amazing day and not having to deal with drama. Ready for new stories I have for you today? Let's go to the first one. And don't forget to listen to the end of the story, guys, to hear my insights. Enjoy the stories, and don't forget to like and subscribe. And of course, don't forget to leave a comment. I, 45 female, am in a difficult situation with my nephew, 25 male, and his family. And I need some perspective, as I simply feel terrible about this whole situation. Last year, my nephew lost his job and couldn't afford to stay with his friends anymore. Having helped raise him and having such a deep connection, I decided to help him out. I had recently bought a house over the summer to rent out, so I let him stay there until he could get back on his feet. I also gave him $3,000 to help with living expenses and such. A few months later, he landed a job at a major tech firm, and during Thanksgiving, he bragged that his starting salary was almost as much as I've been making after 10 years in my current job. I was naturally very enthused for him and extremely proud. I decided after the holidays, it was time for him to move on and get a place and start paying rent. As spring rolled around, I urged him to find another place to live or start paying me. I also told him we could forget the $3,000 and just move on. He refused, getting really upset and saying it was convenient for him to stay since it was close to his new job and that he was not in a financial situation to be paying rent right now, which confused me, as I previously stated he was bragging about his salary. I then offered to let him rent the property for a little more than the mortgage, which was less than what I planned to charge other tenants. He refused and has barely spoken to me since. I really struggled, but my family insisted that I give him a 30-day notice to vacate the property, which I had notarized. He ignored it. I then started to talk about eviction. We got into another argument when I got to repainting the house, with notice, because he had scuffed up the walls. He kicked over my paint cans, ruining the carpet. I had no choice but to file for eviction. It was all simply too straining. I had some valuables and furniture I had stored in the crawl space I'd been too afraid to move due to the tension. I found that he sold my retro games and consoles, 2 paintings, my dining set, and a few other things through a camera on my property. I called the police to file a report. He came home during this completely out of his mind. They found ketamine in his system and paraphernalia, and he is now facing jail time for the possession, but also DUI. My family is now furious with me, blaming me for ruining his life. His parents won't talk to me, and they claim I knew he was high when I called the police when he hadn't even come home yet. They said I should have called them before the police to settle it. I feel like I did everything I could to help him until he crossed too many lines. I just am so stressed and guilt-ridden. I just need to hear some opinions. Not the a-hole. He's the only person who ruined his life. I wonder if he was lying about the job altogether. You were a good family member and gave him a hand when he needed it. He then was ungrateful and refused to abide by the agreement. Him being high is even more reason to call the police, because he could have been dangerous to try to handle, with or without your family. I wonder how much they knew and how much they were enabling his behavior. Not the a-hole. You were above and beyond to support your nephew, offering him a place to stay and money to get back on his feet. Despite your generosity, he took advantage of you, refused to pay rent, and even sold your things. Not the a-hole. I wonder if he was lying about the job too. He is the architect of his own downfall. He did the D. He did the theft. He did the squatting. He did the vandalism. Time to pay the piper. As for his parents, they didn't do anything to help him, and they're not doing anything now. Block them. I've, 23 female, been with my boyfriend for 5 years, and we just had our first child in August. I never had any problems with my mother-in-law, but when I got pregnant, she got really weird. When we told her we were expecting, she was really happy, but immediately said, "It's going to be a girl." I didn't ask her why she was so convinced, but when we discovered that I was in fact having a girl, she told me, "That baby is supposed to be mine." She was kind of laughing when she said it, but it was really weird. When I asked her to explain, she told me she had miscarried a few years after having her son, my boyfriend. It was a girl, and the miscarriage was really traumatic for her. She told me she just felt like my baby was the one she lost reincarnated. I didn't know what to say. I knew the story of her miscarriage, but I didn't know she was still this affected by it, to the point of saying something like this. I talked about it with my boyfriend, and he told me it was no big deal, that she would get over it. But not really. Ever since I gave birth, She's trying to make decisions for my baby, and she won't stop calling my daughter hers. Also, my boyfriend and I didn't choose a name for her until maybe a day after she was born, and my mother-in-law spent that whole day trying to convince me to call my baby Elizabeth. She tried to play it off, but my boyfriend later told me that was the name she had chosen for the baby she miscarried. And on Christmas Eve, I caught her calling my baby Lizzie, which is not really remotely close to her actual name. I don't like this at all, but my boyfriend just tells me to leave it alone. I don't want to diminish her pain in any way, and I don't want to pretend I know how having a miscarriage feels. But I don't like how she speaks about my baby. It's to the point, every time she even takes her into her arms, I tense up, thinking about how she thinks of her as her daughter. I don't know if I'm just too protective of my girl or if I have a good reason to not like this situation. This is extremely unhealthy for all parties concerned, and it will probably get worse with time if it's not addressed. Your child might have serious issues one day, having a grandmother who denies her own identity. Your boyfriend is wrong. You're right to be freaked out. Your mother-in-law should get therapy. I feel like referring to someone else's child as your own crosses a huge line, regardless of who that person is. It's thoughtful of you to be hesitant to mention anything because of the pain it might bring her, but this is a situation that needs to be dealt with right away to avoid further issues. Be honest and explain to her what the issue is. No need to be harsh, but keep it focused on you and your feelings. That may help her not feel singled out as if you're attacking her. Instead of, I don't like when you say she's your baby, try, I don't like when someone refers to my baby as their own. That way, you're not only talking about her, but she'll still get the message, since she's someone in your life that does this. Both fiancé's parents just visited for a week, and everything seemed great, until my future father-in-law got to speak to his son alone. He told him that it is a shame that his son can't be with someone beautiful. This bomb dropped out of nowhere and caught me by incredible surprise, since we did get his parents' blessing. The father said that he stares at beautiful women on the street, and he watches men in the family get married to beautiful females, and he just gets sad for his son. He pointed to my personality and loyalty as a big deal bonus that my fiancé is getting out of marrying me, but he just couldn't get over the fact that I was slim. I'm wearing size EU8 and have B-cup chest, and not pretty. My fiancé was trying to fight back, but would be quickly shut down by his elderly father. He says he was caught off guard that he didn't actually know what to respond with. The father quickly left the room, never revisited the topic, and continued being charming to me for the rest of their week-long visit. I found out later that evening and wasn't initially fazed, as I have a lot of self-worth and know how often I get asked out in the streets. I was just incredibly surprised. But now, 2 weeks later, I somehow can't sleep or stop thinking about it. It must have affected me more than I expected, probably because I've always wanted to be loved by the parents of my partner. My confidence took a surprisingly massive hit. The same father is making my fiancé's brother doubt his 8-year-old relationship due to religious differences between him and his girlfriend. My instinct is telling me that I shouldn't care about this and never seek validation from my other half's parents. A part of me, though, still wants to prove something to them. Is it pointless to try? My fiancé says he does feel like a middle finger has been put into his face, but he's not fazed. He says it would be nice to get that thumbs up from his own father, but it is what it is. He finds me beautiful, and this won't change his mind. How do I get over this? Yeah, if my dad said something like that about my significant other, he would be instantly uninvited from the wedding, no takebacks. That's an instant go straight to jail, do not pass go, do not collect $200 level transgression for me. My boyfriend's family once accused me of being a fraud because of my successes and because I flew him to New York for dinner for an anniversary surprise. I'm guessing she implied I made my money another way, or I was spoiled by my parents. I haven't taken a dime from them since I graduated from my bachelor's degree. This was despite the fact that my boyfriend was at my grad party, has spoken with my assistant multiple times, and we have been together 5 years, including throughout the start of my career. I won't lie, I was very hurt by this, and I let it affect me for a while, mainly because I was already insecure. My field is very tough and full of assertive men, and I'm a petite Asian woman, so I already struggle to fit in. What helped me was realizing that the family friend was a loser. She was like an overweight woman, 40 plus years my senior, and still talking crap about a 20-something-year-old. I pitied her because, my God, I'd hate to be that annoying and spiteful in 40 years. Same goes for your father-in-law. Realize that he's just a pathetic, creepy human being, and you don't need that in your life. We're both junior doctors in our early 30s, met in med school, married for just under 2 years. She's my best friend and love of my life. I know I am the same to her. Marriage as two young docs is tough, but worth it. We juggle 80 to 90-hour work weeks, sometimes missing each other for days because of staggered shifts, night calls. But we make it work, and thankfully kids will not be in the picture. We know what our jobs demand of us, and we signed up for them anyway. It's a hell of a ride, and I'm so glad that I'm doing this with her, conquering life's challenges together. Here's what happened a month ago. It was a particularly tough week where we pretty much wouldn't be able to spend lucid hours with each other at all between Tuesday and Sunday, except for a 3-hour period on Thursday evening. So we decided that I would pick her up from work. We'd go somewhere nice for dinner, and then get to sleep on time before the next workday. That's a 10 p.m. bedtime. A nice, precious date night. A moment of calm and connection amidst the raging storm of work. I also want to give some professional context to what's about to happen. Technically, you're off duty at 5 p.m. when you hand over to your night colleagues to follow up on urgent investigations or plans overnight and see new admissions. But that doesn't mean you leave at 5 p.m. Far from it. We hand over these things so that we can focus on finishing up the tasks that we can't hand over. Basically the stuff that's our responsibility as the primary physician. Typically, we're only done with this at 7 or 7:30. But on a bad day, it can be as late as 10 or 11 p.m. So if we've planned dinner after work, we're basically betting that we'll end on time, since it's never a guarantee. What do you do if a patient becomes very sick while you're officially off duty, but you're still in the ward doing work? Technically, it's not your responsibility, and the night team will be called in to attend to the patient ASAP. But ethically, that's not the oath we took. Off duty or not, your own patient or not, we're still doctors. If the code blue alarm sounds, we run to the patient immediately and do what's necessary to save a life, especially when every second counts in a cardiac arrest and the night team is 2 minutes away. This has happened multiple times to both of us, and it's the worst feeling to be just about to head out the door when the bloody alarm goes off. But I know my duty. You just can't look the other way. My wife looked the other way that day. She was already running almost an hour late for our precious date, which we had been really looking forward to and hyping up via texts all day. And I was sitting in the parking lot waiting for her. Frustrating, of course, but I know what our jobs involve. When she finally got to the car, she was pale and looked a bit sick. Guilt and "don't talk to me about work" written all over her face. Didn't talk much during dinner. When I finally got her to tell me what was up, she said that the code alarm rang just as she was finishing up, and instead of running towards, she ran away. Sneaked out of the ward before anyone noticed and ran downstairs to meet me for our date. I couldn't believe it. She left a critically ill patient for the sake of our ducking dinner date. Now I felt sick too. A month on, I haven't been the same with her. I understand that she made the choice because our little time together was precious, but I wouldn't have done the same, and I am absolutely judging the duck out of her for it. The patient subsequently died, and while I don't blame her for it, I still think she screwed up that day. One of the things I respect the most about her is how dedicated she is to her patients, and how she doesn't do anything halfway. This decision she made, even if she made it for my sake and for our marriage, has made me question her as a doctor and a person. I've lost some respect for her, and it's affecting my relationship and ability to connect with her. Please help. I suspect I will get many comments telling me to get off my moral high horse, but I hope you will take the time to understand that this isn't just a job, and I can't take this lightly. We even had a discussion a few years before our wedding where we agreed that we'd stop to attend to every road traffic accident that didn't already have EMS at the scene, even if we were on the way to our wedding and dressed in white. Did she forget that? Edited to include the specific help I am requesting. How to empathize with the decision my wife made, stop judging her, and feel connected to her again. If necessary, how to open up a conversation about this without being accusatory or making things worse. I don't know how she feels now, but she definitely felt guilty that night. Thank you. 1. Cardiac arrests aren't that difficult to run. An experienced floor tech could probably run one. 2. There are probably several doctors other than your wife who attended to that patient, not to mention the mid-levels and RNs. 3. The chance of a good post-arrest outcome, even in hospital, is abysmal. To conclude, you know all these points are correct, and deep down, you know that her presence at that code wouldn't have resulted in any measurable positive change in outcome for that patient. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think you're overthinking this. You should probably have a sit-down convo with your wife, where you both talk through your feelings. Might also be a good idea to involve a therapist, especially considering you're both so overworked and stressed. Nurse here. Her shift was over. She wasn't on call. There's plenty of team members in the hospital. It's her off time. No one, and I mean no one, expects her to, or wants her to, stay late and just be one more unnecessary body in a code room. She signed out. Honestly, I love working with residents like your wife who understand there needs to be a work-life balance. We all find it creepy when residents think that the unit will implode without them present. We've got this. Codes are easy and scripted, and we will work with the on-call doctor. It's time for you to quit focusing on work and add some balance. And when you are done, leave. Update at 24 hours. Despite the overwhelming comments saying that staying was not my wife's duty, I am not convinced. I'm actually kind of shocked that this was the main sentiment. Maybe this is a cultural, systemic thing, but in the Southeast Asian country where I work, we are absolutely expected to respond in a situation like this. The code team is on average 2 to 3 minutes away once the alarm is sounded by the nurses. Nurses in my country, although incredible and competent, are sadly not empowered or trained in the same way they are in the US, UK, Australia. A friend's spouse from the US worked here as a nurse for a while and then decided her job scope was way too limited compared to back home, and there are threads on Reddit that support this. Apart from advanced practice nurses who arrive with the code team, there is no one in the ward who can run the code, and there are no level techs or anything like that. The first thing the nurses in the ward do is initiate CPR, and then run to find a doctor within the ward or neighboring ward who can assist. If we are around, we are expected to respond. I am well aware that the hospital won't fall to bits without me or my wife's presence, but specifically in a code situation, I will always be affected by 2 experiences of mine, both after hours too. The first being one where the code team was attending to another code, and it was 6 minutes before they arrived. Shaken as I was, I had to manage ACLS on my own as a first year. The second was when defibrillation within 60 seconds kept a patient out of ICU. Both of these times I happened to be in the ward, and I believe my response made a significant difference to the patient. Narcissism or not, I believe I did the appropriate thing and would do it again. Speaking with my close colleagues, I learned of an incident with a senior registrar who was on call for a different set of wards than the one he was hiding in. Cue the code blue alarm. Registrar tries to sneak out of the wards before he's caught, but the nurses run to him for help and he says no, he's not on duty for this ward. He leaves. The next day, the nurse manager writes to the head of department. Registrar nearly loses his job and his chance to become a consultant, attending for the Americans. He was deemed unprofessional and selfish because he didn't go beyond what his duty was on paper. Does this suck? Yes. Does it show clearly what the expectations are from our superiors? Unfortunately, also yes. If a patient is very sick at 1 a.m. and plans need to be clarified with the primary consultant, they will be called at 1 a.m., even if they're not on duty, because they take ultimate responsibility for the patient. That's how it is here. So, no, if I were in my wife's position, I still believe that her professional and ethical duty was to respond to the code, just until the code team arrived, and they would take over from there. However, what I have learned from your comments is, the system is exploiting us and our willingness to work overtime. Of course, we know that. We're encouraged to lie about our work hours so we don't exceed 80 hours per week, and penalized if we exceed it, even though in some rotations the basic hours will exceed it even if you don't really stay overtime. There is no such thing as overtime pay either. Nurses here get strict shifts and breaks, but doctors do not, and they can cancel our leave at a moment's notice if they need us at work. But slow progress is being made. Until it gets better, we're kind of just accepting it. Regardless of the oath we took, one needs to take care of themselves in order to take care of others. One commenter said that my wife may have needed the dinner more than just wanting it. I didn't consider that she may have just really needed that time away from work in order to stay sane, more than I did. Several comments have also pointed out that she may be burnt out, which is a real possibility, and a place I have been before. Whatever I believe, my wife may feel differently, and it's worth having a discussion about what our values are. Opinions are mixed regarding whether or not I should talk to her about this, but she is my wife, and I'm going to do so. I love her, and I want to reconnect, and I can't do so without hearing from her. I'm going to start with asking her how she's coping, if she's feeling burnt out, and what I can do to support her.